Welcome to today's Courage, Connection, and Comfort, the Story of Tower Health Nursing podcast. My name is Mary Agnew, Senior Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer of Tower Health, and I am here today with our very first guest, Christina Carroll, who is a member of our Tower Select team. And I'm very excited about being with her today. She has a great story to tell, and we'd like to share it with you. Christina, you were here during the emergency phase of COVID-19. You're here today, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that and what your experience was. So for right now, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I love the title, by the way.
Oh, do you? Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you.
It's a great title.
All right. Courage, Connection, and Comfort.
Yes.
Does that describe it?
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I was inspired by our first interview.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So thank you for that. So I'm glad you're good now. Let's go back in time. I'm bringing you back to that time when you were working on the floor during COVID-19, and talk to us about what you would call your low point.
Oh, okay. Well, it almost feels like it's so recent now that we're thinking about it right now in the moment. You almost think that you're over it, but you're really not. This is just the beginning. I would have to say that I know for me particularly, one of the lowest points was having to change the way I nurse, the type of nursing that I want to give to my patients. That was really hard because it wasn't just one or two things that changed. It was a lot of things that changed at once.
Right, so many things.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. What changed?
Well, I mean, the simple things that nurses take for granted. You know, how many times over these past, I think I've been here now for 9 or 10 years, the importance of take the couple of minutes to be at the bedside with your patient, face them, have that conversation, make eye contact. The simple things like hourly rounding, how important that is, and the difference that it really makes for patients, because when they bring back those surveys, that's the stuff that they want to talk about is, wow, my nurse, it wasn't, I had, all these different medications and so many different doctors in my care. It was, my nurse really listened to me. They took the time to figure out what was really going on. So I think that was pretty hard because during the time of COVID, we were told as nurses and aides to limit your time at the bedside. Go in there and do everything at once and then leave.
Yeah.
So that was very hard because it's almost like you're rushing everything when you're in there. Like, I need to come in, I need to do your vital signs, I need to give you your meds, make sure that you have food here, do you need to go to the bathroom? And that's it.
Right.
And then you have to leave the room.
Right. So total change in workflow processes, right? PPE and getting all geared up to go into a room.
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, that was difficult. That was. Also, all the background noise that you hear, like, limit it because we don't know if we have enough. When you're there in the moment, that's really not what you want to hear.
Right. Yeah.
Like you have everything else going inside of your head right now that you need to be the strong one. You have to go in there. You're going to be the one taking care of, but try not to get this dirty because
you're going to use it again.
You're going to have to use this for 12 and a half hours. And God forbid something would spill. Knowing that you would have to, it wasn't readily available. The mask, you would have to call a supervisor. So then you would have to explain yourself to the supervisor why you would need an additional mask when you've already received one.
Very different. What a tough position to be in.
Yeah, that was hard.
And think about the compounding effect of the internal distress of not being able to take care of your patients the way that you want to take care of them, and then the PPE insecurity, layered on top of that, and then just the total environment where you found yourself. Where were you during this emergency phase of COVID-19?
Here at the hospital, where was I? Was actually asked by my director at the time if I would sort of volunteer to be on T3, which was turned in. It's typically a surgical unit that was turned into one of the first all COVID units. And since I am a part of Tower Select, I have that experience from the medical side and also the surgical side. So they really wanted somebody to sort of step in and be there to help also with the nurses that are just surgical to transition now to mostly all medical patients. So I was asked if I would be okay being temporarily placed there for the next few weeks. And at the time, I didn't hesitate at all.
And the altruism certainly is there. Your supervisor approached you in our first interview when you said that you kind of jumped right in. You spoke for a little bit, and then you said, and I was a little bit naive. So you didn't know what you didn't know going into it, right?
Right. Not at all. I'm like, this will pass over. All this around us, like, wow, like there's so much happening right now, but is it really that bad?
Yeah. So tell me, and you were there from day one.
Day one. I was there the very first day, and I happened to be there the very last day when we were transitioning the patients to other units so that they could go back to being a surgical floor.
So you got the bounty of the full experience.
I sure did.
So tell me, what was the unit like? What was the tenor of the unit? Care of the patients was difficult. How was the teamwork?
I don't want to say being an outsider because as part of Tower Select, I really feel like I do have great connections on multiple different floors. But that I know that particular floor, T3, they are very close family, which is great. I think that really benefited them with that transition because of how close they were and how many years they've all been working together. I can say for myself personally, they were very thankful that I was there, and they knew that they could rely on me, and so they sort of took me in as well, which was good. As far as the atmosphere, those first couple of weeks, with everything else going around, all this extra stimulation, the staff themselves, including myself, we were kind of quiet. It was almost like, we're just one mindset here. Like, we have to do this. We don't want to sit down. We don't want to think about all the things we don't know. Let's just get through this day. Let's take care of the patients and figure everything out later.
It sounds as though there was almost an undercurrent of fear because of the unknown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because at that time, the COVID tests themselves were taking
days,
very long to come back with the results. And the patients were terrified because they didn't know, do I have it or don't I have it? Why is everyone wearing all of this when they're coming into my room? And a lot of times, with that population, it was a lot of the elderly. They have dementia. They're probably having some acute delirium from being in the hospital outside of where they normally are. So it was almost like you had to repeat it every time going in to see them. You had them for 12 hours, but you always had to remind them, this is what's happening. We don't know, but this is what we're doing. Did I really do everything that I could have done? Thinking back now, I really do think that I probably could have spent more time with those patients and talk to them, but because of everything else in the background and they're telling you get in and get out, you're seeing doctors come on the floor and just staying in the office and making phone calls in and asking the nurse to take the phone in and answer the phone and hold it there at the patient's ear. So it was almost like they're so afraid. And at that point you're looking at everyone else to sort of say, it's okay, like you're expected to do for that patient. My job was to say, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. Yet, I don't know that we got that in return as nurses. I don't know that we truly, truly felt that, like, we're going to get through this.
Well, you didn't know.
We didn't.
No.
No.
And part of what you're describing, that internal conflict, am I doing the right thing? Could I do it differently? Is part of the moral distress I think that many nurses felt. They wanted to be able to do things differently. They were afraid. They received direction, followed direction the best that they could. And I think that that's part of the trauma is questioning yourself, right? So when we started this interview, I asked you what was your low point, and our listeners can't see you, but your facial expression and your whole body slumped, and it all suddenly came back to you all at once, and you think you're through it, and you're not. You're reliving it again. And so I think the part about giving yourself permission to say that I did my very best. Christina, I know you. You did nothing less than your best. I know it. Doesn't mean you're not questioning yourself now.
Right.
So let's talk about the high point. So contrast that with what were the high points during this experience? Because I know there were some.
There were some. I got married.
Congratulations.
When we didn't think it was going to happen. And that was also part of it. I remember talking to you before we had our wedding planned for June. So when all of this was happening and as it was getting closer and closer, and then we started to receive the phone calls that, the different things that we had rented, they weren't going to be able to accommodate. They were postponing. So we were sort of put in a bind. So as all of this negativity is happening, that was sort of like the light at the end of the tunnel, but that was dimming.
Right.
Because we were noticing it's probably not going to happen.
You had to postpone your wedding.
I did have to postpone my wedding, yes. And as a 35-year-old woman who's waited this long, it was not easy. It was not easy to do. But we decided then, this is what we want to do. So we did it in our backyard a month later. So that was probably that was the highlight of that time, really.
Oh, it's got to be amazing.
It was great. It was so simple, and it was myself, my husband, my now stepdaughter, our dog was running around in the yard. I mean, it was a great day, and it was all about us for a second, which was also really nice. Yeah. We have to remember to think about us too. So it was nice to just take that time in as a family and realize 2020 can't be that bad, right? So I'm glad that we did it, just so that when we ever talk about the year 2020, that's something that I can think about, and it'll bring a smile to my face.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what it was like taking care of patients during times of no visitation.
Oh, yeah, that was hard. I just remember feeling like I needed to fulfill so many roles at once. We did everything. We were the housekeeper. The housekeepers weren't allowed to go into the room, so that's what we did. The dietitians weren't allowed to go in and drop the food trays off, so that's what we did. And like I said before, the doctors, they have a very important role. But I almost feel like I would have liked to have worked the front line with the doctor. I would have liked to have seen them in the rooms, on the floor more. And
I don't know if that experience translated across the system. I hear what you're saying. And so that loss of teamwork or at
Yes.
least that physical presence
Yes.
of support was a loss that you felt.
Yes. Yeah, it was. It was.
So, Christina, with all of these things, you're pretty deep. How did you do it?
Just keep swimming.
Is that what you told yourself?
Absolutely. Yes. You know, it was, I want to say it was good and bad in the aspect that things were moving so quickly that, and probably why, one of the reasons why it was so low at the time, because I was solely focused on my role as a nurse and how I provide care to my patients, that you don't really think about your own emotions at the time and things that you might need. And even just a short drive home that I had, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was on the phone calling my family and, checking in on them. What did you do today? Did you get to the grocery store? Like all these other things. And then, these long hours, you get home, you're undressing right there on the front porch.
Right, because you don't want to bring your uniform inside.
Yes, putting everything in the trash bag. We had a system happening.
Yeah.
But, you're jumping in the shower, you're eating something, and then you're going to bed.
It's exhausting.
You have to go to bed. You have to get rest. That was difficult. I think I got through it because I didn't have time to think about me. Honestly, I think that was a big help. It gives me so much in this role. I talked to you before about it. It took me years to figure out, what do you want to do with your life? Like maybe I should have figured that out earlier, but I always knew I wanted to help people. But when I came to nursing, it was like, this is what I'm meant to do. So that sort of took over. That reality that I've worked my whole life. This is what I'm meant to do. This is what I'm going to do. Like, how dare I think about what I might need right now?
Well, remember our RBC model, and you can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself.
Yes.
What we had talked about was your sense of that solemn responsibility, right? There is no one else to care for this patient right now. I'm it. I am the mother, the daughter, the sister, the caregiver. And what that meant to you from, I'll say, an existential perspective, right? Like the importance of that and what it means to you on a deeply spiritual level.
I don't know that there's nothing else that I can really compare it to, because it's like its own entity. It's just something that I'm privileged. That's how I really feel like I'm privileged. Because I want the future nurses, to realize wow, all this stuff is going on in the world, but just the fact that you showed up.
Right.
And that you wanted to make a difference, and that you did make a difference, that I continued to show up.
Right.
When they were scared, when everyone was scared, that I was still there, and that they could count on me at least for those 12 hours that I was going to be there. So, yeah, I feel honored. I feel honored that I was even asked to temporarily be placed there. So, yeah, I feel privileged. I'm glad that I was able to do that. And now that I know, now that I sort of have dipped my feet in it, because we know it's not over.
Right.
I would do it again. If someone would ask me, would you temporarily? Yes, I would. And this time I'll bring more of what I learned, more of what I know now about it, and maybe be able to incorporate all those things that we want, as a unit hospital, as Tower Select. So I think that there's definitely a way that I can incorporate spending more time at the bedside with the patients during a critical epidemic like this.
And there's a learning curve, right?
Absolutely.
And you alluded to this, and that is people sense your words may not be perfect, the care may not be perfect, but the people always can see or feel the intent, right?
Yes.
And I believe you're right. I believe that people sense that intent and appreciate that very deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. And families too, because we were really, that must have been terrible. I didn't personally have any of my family members have to be in the hospital, sick with COVID and not be able to see them and not be able, I can't even imagine that. I can't even imagine if, something would happen to my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my husband, stepdaughter, and know that I can't go in there. I'm not allowed to see them. I'm not allowed to help them. So that was really hard, and it was evident on phone calls.
Right.
That was very tough to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And, just try to give them some hope, like, you know what, they're in the best place. And honestly, at the time, they were in the best place. I know that, we took great care of these patients.
So, thank you for all of that. Switching gears just a little bit, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I went into nursing. That was like at the end. That was my last decision. So I went to Holy Name, which is now Berks Catholic. And after Holy Name, I went to Alvernia. And I have my bachelor's in behavioral health and addiction studies. After working a little bit in that field, I decided to go back to school to become a dental assistant. And I ended up getting a position at Berks Oral Surgery as a surgical tech it was close to 4 years. When I was in that role, I was like, you know what, I think I can do a little more. This is really interesting because we were taking patients back and asking them their medical history, and, I was learning new medications, and I was like, you know what, I think I can do more. I feel like I can do more. So while I was working as a surgical assistant, I went back to school for nursing, which I had to change my whole life.
Whoa,
and move
yeah.
back in with my parents.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was not easy, but I knew that the end goal, I was going to be happy with what I would be doing with my life. So I'm glad that I did that. And that was a great day. That was a wonderful day. I remember walking that stage, and that was my favorite walks of all. And I had these really great pink glittery high heels shoes on.
All right.
It was wonderful. It was great. And my family was there, and it was like, oh, I can breathe now.
Yeah.
And then day one.
Right.
Day one of working at the Reading Hospital. And it was great.
What a journey.
It was great.
What a journey.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
It was so worth it. So worth it. All the steps I had to take to figure it out.
Yeah.
It was worth it.
And here you are. You were meant to be here.
Yes.
And last question. What advice would you give to a new nurse or a younger Christina Carroll who would be entering into the second phase of COVID?
Oh,
potentially.
Don't run away. Don't run away. This is probably going to be the best learning experience and will set you up for your future in a way that you can't even imagine right now, because the connections that you will feel with your patients at that time are going to be truly genuine, because you're going to feel how important you are to that patient, because you are their person in the room. You're really their person. They're not connected. They feel like they're so not connected to anything else. They're isolated. They're in a place they've never been before, with noises that they've never heard before and different faces they've never seen before. But at least for 12 hours, they know that you're their person. And that connection is so important just going forward. That's why we became a nurse.
Right.
Right? It wasn't to just pass meds. That's not why we became nurses. We became nurses because we want to feel connections with our patients, and we want to make a difference on all levels, not just when you're sick. Like, really, like, let's talk and what else is going on, you know? So don't run.
That's the best advice I ever heard. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Christina, for being our very first guest
Thank you for
on our
having me.
podcast, Courage, Connection, and Comfort.
I love it. I love that title.
I love that title too. And actually, everything that you described today is linked to each one of those things. You just talked about caring connection, talked about, you didn't say you were courageous, but you were courageous. And many nurses, all of our nurses, really demonstrated incredible courage during this time. And I love the don't run, right?
Don't run.
And how could you have known at the beginning, right, when there were all these question marks, there were no certainties, only fear and the unknown, and yet you prevailed, and you're here to tell the story. So
Well, this is our year, right?
this is our year, the year of the nurse, 200th birthday of
Yeah.
Florence Nightingale.
Yeah. We
right?
can't just, go quietly. We have to make a big thing.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thanks.